Aren't fairy tales real? No. Shit. But are they true? There can be a difference there. Fairy tales might not be real, but they can very well be true. Aren't fairy tales real? No. Shit. But are they true? There can be a difference there. Fairy tales might not be real, but they can very well be true. How are they like children? We do infantilize them. Tell them to go to bed, stuff like that. So like older people are fragile, like babies. And so what do we have to do with babies that we have to do with old people as well? Take care of them. Yeah. We have to have them in bed by a certain time, and they can't eat certain foods. And so there's two ways that we can see that older people, I guess elderly people are like children. One is that it's what we project onto them. We have to take care of them. But there's something else there also. If you have an ugly haircut, is a little kid going to tell you that you have an ugly haircut?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Is your old grandpa going to tell you that you have an ugly haircut?
For sure.
Yeah, probably in the most offensive terms possible as well. So there are these two ways that elderly people are like children. Now, something happens with fairy tales. Besides Shrek, so let me name another an older fairy tale. What's your favorite Disney fairy tale? Pinocchio. Oh shit. All right. Wait, Pinocchio. Pinocchio. What's the name? Sorry. Oh, no, to you. So Pinocchio. So what's the story of Pinocchio about?
The wooden doll that wants to be a little boy, and when he lies, his nose grows, and I think he has to tell the truth to become a boy or something.
Mm-hmm. So there's a marionette who is a shadow of a real boy. Okay, so hopefully now you start to pick up on the Platonic implications there. It's not too far from the allegory of the cave. It's about a wooden boy who's a puppet, who's a marionette, who's inside of a cave, who then eventually ventures out and experiences the real world. And what kind of things does he experience out there? Well, everything that the rest of us experience. And so when he comes back from that journey, he's no longer a puppet. He's now a full-on human being because he's experienced the world as it really is. Before that, like most people, we're just images, we're carbon copies, we're carbon images of our parents because that's the extent of our experience. So we talk like them, we probably walk like them, we have very similar mannerisms when we're very little kids. And then as we grow older, we say, well, we develop our own personality. Kind of. What happens is we get influenced from other places. So we now, rather than just being influenced by our families, in which case we're like little puppets, we're made by them, just as Geppetto makes a puppet. But now we start getting influences from everywhere else out in the world, from school, from media, from just walking around out in the world, and we call that making our own personality. What we're doing is we're making like a personality salad. We're taking stuff from everywhere that we interact with, and we're making our own person, and ultimately that's what we become. We become our own real individual, and our strings to our families are cut. There's a lot more to it than just that, of course, but this is kind of the overarching kind of like message behind Pinocchio. It's not just about a little boy with not just about a little wooden puppet with strings. By the way, have any of you seen the newer, the claymation Pinocchio? It's on Netflix. It just came out earlier this year. You should check that out, man. It's actually really good. I watched it because I watch all fairy tales, but I started kind of skeptically, like, oh, this is going to be, because I heard it was very dark. It is kind of dark, but it's really, really good. I was impressed with how good it is. The story is, it's changed, but it's similar enough that you still recognize the story. But it's set during, I think it's set during World War II. Yeah, set during World War II, actually. So it's interesting kind of implications there. Anyway, now, when you're a little kid, all that you hear is this thing about a puppet who becomes a real little boy, and it sparks your imagination, sparks your creativity. And by the way, does anybody remember how that movie starts? By any chance? There's a song at the beginning.
That's true.
Yeah, that's right. It's the most popular song. It's the most popular Disney song. In fact, when we think about Disney, it's the thing that most people think about. It's in all their commercials, literally. It's in their logo. It's the wishing upon a star. So why a star? Why a star? Where do stars appear?
The sky.
Yeah, what kind of sky? Particularly black, pitch black sky. So out of the darkness, out of the absolute pitch darkness, comes this this little ray of hope. Now, if you aim for a star and you say, I'm going to get there, are you ever going to get there? Not with that attitude. But if you really believe you can, as someone from second period said, aim for the stars, but negotiate on the moon. He said, in other words, you can aim for the farthest, most impossible point that you can even imagine. And if you aim for it and you really strive towards it, you might get there. You might get there. You might not. You probably won't. But you're going to get a lot closer to it than if you had just looked at it and said, that'd be so awesome if I could get there, and then walked away. What Geppetto's wishing on is something that's way outside the reach of his possibilities. He's aiming at something way far beyond what he could ever possibly attain. And then, strangely enough, after enough trials, he actually does achieve the thing. And then you've got this great story about Pinocchio, and he gets swallowed by a whale. Who else is inside the whale? Anybody remember? Nobody? What's that?
The whale mouth?
Yeah, who's inside it with him?
The little guy.
Yeah, Jiminy Cricket, whose initials are JC. Don't miss that. It actually matters. That's really important. There's another very famous historical JC who's represented by the cricket. But there's somebody else in there with him and the cricket. Geppetto. Geppetto's in there. He has to enter the belly of the whale to save his father. It's an old story about having to descend into the underworld to rescue somebody. In this case here, he's having to rescue his own father. Why? Well, because elderly people are like children. They need to be taken care of. They need to be rescued. They need to be protected. And there's something intuitive about that when you guys right now, maybe less so now, but when you guys were like 10, who's the strongest person in the world when you're 10 years old for a lot of people? Your dad. And no matter how strong you get, your dad's always stronger. And then you get older and you get into like your late teens and you're like, oh, I can arm wrestle him. But now he's got old man strength, so he's hard to beat. And then at some point you'll show up and you're going to arm wrestle him and you're going to beat him. And you'll be like, holy crap, I beat him. And then you'll beat him a lot more often because you're going to start to realize that just as he was once the strongest person in the world, now he's becoming one of the weaker people. And you start to realize, holy shit, he's mortal. He's going to die. Everyone's going to die. And I have to take, and then at some point maybe it's going to occur to you that you have to take care of your parents because elderly people are like children, have to be taken care of. And once that happens, somebody's going to hit you, hopefully. Holy crap, I'm not 10 years old anymore. I'm an adult, probably older, an older adult as well. You're probably in your 40s when you have to start taking care of your parents. Maybe 30s, depending on the case. And so now it occurs to you that you too are now falling into that cycle because at some point you're taking care of them because they've now returned to that childlike state, and then it means that it's going to happen to you as well. Because if it can happen to your parents, the strongest people in the world, it can happen to you too. And so I know if you're one of the people who are like, well, I didn't even know my dad. Don't be cynical. And your mom, fine. Somebody who's in your life, who's an older figure, who you view as being strong. And so it'll occur to you that that's going to be you someday. And so yeah, the whole idea is you cut your strings, become your own person. But you can't take care of your parents until you become your own person. And that's one of the incentives to becoming your own person. It's one of the incentives to growing up, becoming more mature. It's that you're going to have to take care of somebody someday. Not just your parents, by the way, but other children as well, probably, your own. And you can't do that well if you're weak. You have to be strong in order to do that. And not just to be able to weather the storms of life, to mirror today, but also so that you can be somebody who the child can look up to, hopefully. Some people absolutely just despise their parents, and yet they do nothing to themselves become somebody who is worth. Sorry, they don't do anything to become someone themselves who's worth looking up to. In other words, become someone who's worth looking up to. Yeah, cut the strings, because that's when you can really start to grow, once you cut those strings off. Who knew there was so much going on in just a Disney story? And there's way more than just that, too. It's like Peter Pan. You guys seen Peter Pan? Okay. Anybody remember how Peter Pan starts? What he's doing? This is a really creepy scene, man. If you ever watch it, he's running around and he's in silhouette. You just see his eyes and then his outline, running around rooftops. And then he's looking inside someone's house, and then his face cuts into light, and he's cut right in half. He's got half of a shadow on his face, and he's got half of light on his face. Where have you seen this before? In this class? A few weeks, yeah, it's Carl Jung. The whole thing is a Jungian exposition. And by the way, in case you missed it, what's he looking for? Because what's escaped from him? His shadow. Yeah, so what does he have to do? He has to catch his shadow, which is always running away from him, because he has to control it. Right now it's out of control. It's running around, it's knocking stuff over. So he has to capture the shadow, and then it takes another person, Wendy. In that case there, don't miss the romantic connection there. He's a guy, and he has to have somebody who he can count on to help him to individuate, to combine the persona and the shadow. She has to sew the shadow back onto him. Because if he's left to his own devices, if he has no mother figure, if he has nobody to help take care of him, then he's just going to be a wild creature his entire life. And that's what he ends up becoming. Or that's what he ends up remaining. Because he never matures. The whole idea is that he's forever young, but not in a good way. He's forever young in the way that he never becomes responsible. And because he never does that, he can never learn to love anybody except for himself. He's a narcissist. If you remember the scene where he goes to save Tiger Lily, she's tied up and she's about to be drowned, and he's got Wendy there, and he beats up on Hook for a little bit, and he comes back to Wendy, and he's trying to tell her, did you see that? Did you see how I flew around? Did you see all that? He's like a little kid. He's completely forgetting the responsibility that Tiger Lily is about to drown to death. She has to remind him, oh, go see it. Oh, you're right. Huh, stupid me. And then he flies down. He doesn't care about Tiger Lily. He just wants the attention of being the hero because he can't think of anybody but himself. He's a man-child. Tell me if that sounds familiar to any of you. And so he's unable to step outside of himself. And this also stops him from ever becoming like true friends with the Lost Boys. You know, they admire him. They look up to him. Why? Well, because he's a little bit older, because he can fly, he has magical powers. And so they admire him, but they can never really be friends with him. And then there are two people in his life who really care about him. Tinkerbell, who, by the way, the reason that she's so tiny is because she can only hold one emotion at a time. She's never, like, conflicted. She's only 100% angry, or 100% jealous, or 100% love. She's never anything in between. And that's the story about Tinkerbell. And so she flies around, and then also Wendy cares about him as well, but differently than Tinkerbell. Wendy's in complete admiration and awe of him. He's like a god to her. She's like, oh my goodness, I've told all these stories about him. Where do you think she heard those stories from? Where do people hear stories? Where do people hear fairy tales usually? Where? Okay, but who reads the books? The parents read the books. So where has she gotten these stories of Peter Pan from? Specifically, who? A 50-50 chance, man, you can guess. Her mom. Her dad hates Peter Pan. Remember, he's always pissed off about him? Why does he hate Peter Pan so much? Well, we don't know until the very end of the movie, when the cloud's going by and it's in the shape of the ship. And he looks out there and he says, I have this strange feeling that I've seen that before. Why has he seen that before? Where did he see it?
Is it collective,
Collective unconscious? Almost. What's the other kind of unconscious? Personal unconscious. Why would it kind of look familiar to him, but he wasn't exactly sure? Where has he seen it before? He was a lost boy. How is it that the mom has so many wonderful stories about him, about Peter Pan? Because she was the Wendy of the previous generation. Because just as Wendy goes on the adventures with Peter Pan, her mom used to go on adventures with Peter Pan. But that was the old life, that was back then. And now Wendy's father, who was a lost boy, now he's grown up, and he hates because he's grown up now, because he's taken on the family, and he's working in a law firm, and all this, all this stuff. Now he's taken on responsibility, so he shuns Peter Pan. Not because it's just because it's childish, but because it's self-centered. That's why he hates Peter Pan so much, because he was a lost boy. He was taken in by him. He was enamored of him. And now he's grown up and he realizes the destruction that guy causes. Now, in the book, Peter Pan actually kidnaps the lost boys. That's why they're called the Lost Boys. He goes to the train station, and whenever someone leaves their child unattended, like they look over to get a bus schedule, he sweeps in and he kidnaps the kid. That's why they're called the Lost Boys, because they're boys who were lost. Their parents lost them. And then once they age out and they get too old, they're about to be mature, they return. Or he kills them, depending on which version you read. But he returns them to London. And so Peter Pan's mom, she still loves him, because she likes that whole childhood thing. She loves the adventure. Of course, Peter Pan she never meant as much to Peter Pan as he did to her, but that's because he's not capable of thinking outside of himself. He's only capable of thinking of himself. And so a character like that needs to have somebody who focuses all their attention on him. This is why when he returns, she gets over it. She's done admiring him. Now, there is a sequel to Peter Pan, by the way, and take a guess. Who's the main character of the next one? What's that? Wendy's daughter. Yeah. Now, Wendy's the older woman, and Peter Pan's visiting Wendy's daughter. This guy's going back to cycles of it. That's why he's on that rooftop. That's why he knew where the shadow was going to be, because he's been there before. He's running around the same rooftops. And so there's a lot of... Oh, and by the way, Hook, Captain Hook, what's he afraid of? Yeah, but what's he really afraid of?
Peter Pan.
He hates Peter Pan, for good reason, but there's something else associated with the crocodile that he's really terrified of. Time. Time. Because we're all running away from time. That crocodile reminds him that death is approaching. He's already taken his hand. He's taken part of his body. At some point, time is going to take all of our bodies. And that crocodile is always, it's never very far. If he wants to avoid the crocodile, what could he do? Go live on land. But he doesn't. So that crocodile, he never knows where it is. It's out there somewhere, under the water. It's out there somewhere, because it's always stalking him. Peter Pan, not worried about that crocodile at all, because he's not worried about time. And by the way, Captain Hook's first mate, I don't remember his name, Shepley or whatever it is, he's not worried about it either. Why? Because he's like a little kid himself. He always tells the crocodile, "You leave the captain alone." And he chastises the crocodile listens to him and ends up leaving. Why isn't he afraid of the crocodile? Because he's like a little kid. He's not worried about time. He's not worried about getting older and dying. So this is what it is about Hook. He's running away from time. He's running away from death. And this is why it's so, now if you understand that, you understand why it's so goddamn dark that Peter Pan thinks it's funny to sick the crocodile on Hook. Because now it's just like, here comes Dad, and like throwing death at somebody. So there's a lot going on there. Now, when you're a little kid and you watch the movie, it's a lot of fun. It's about this guy who never flies around, never grows old. He's got these great adventures going on. And then, as we get older, we look back on it and we're like, holy crap, there was a lot going on there. At some point, you may be old enough to start reading fairy tales again and really understanding them. Just because it's not real doesn't mean it's not true. Was there a real Peter Pan? No, but the story is very true. Pinocchio, not real, but my God, that story is so true. It's so true. Questions, comments, concerns, complaints, criticisms, critiques? Why does this room feel like a mortuary right now, man?